and welcome to another episode of Inflection Point Wellness Podcast. Today, we are going to be discussing dopamine. Crap, I don't know if I remember the. I'm trying to log into our chat here. What is the title of this one? Do we have one?
The title is The Dangers of Seeking Dopamine Addiction.
Yes, that's a perfect one. So sorry, I'm logging in real quick here. So the biggest thing I wanted to talk about today is we're going to be talking about, what is dopamine, how it affects our lives, both positive and negatively, because I feel like whenever we hear that word nowadays is, has a very negative connotation. And so I want to bring out and discuss that we actually need dopamine and we can't completely deprive ourselves of dopamine. And when we do, I will be discussing what happens when we don't have enough dopamine in our system, as well as excessive amounts of dopamine in our system. And then I wanted to also discuss what are some, we're going to be discussing unhealthy ways of getting your dopamine fix, and then I would like to discuss healthy ways, which are really simple, and how to simplify your life and how it has impacted me, because I've been, I'm diagnosed ADHD, which for me it means I'm completely dysregulated in dopamine. Some days I'm really I need it, I'm searching for it, and there's other days where I feel like I don't, and I don't have any, and I have no will to do anything. So it's very up and down for me. And I've learned different techniques. Like when I wake up, I have to check in with myself. And, depending on how I'm feeling that day, I know what I need to do at this point. I've been as some of you know, I am a recovering drug addict. So I've been 8 years of me trying to figure out my dopamine levels, and, addiction and dopamine go hand in hand. And just so it's very important, if you're addicted to anything, whether it be social media, video games, drugs, alcohol, food, anything that's gonna stimulate your senses, it's important to understand dopamine and how different ways to regulate it, and how to notice within yourself if you're on the high end or low end, and then work from there. I do believe that absolutely you can regulate yourself without having to medicate yourself. It just takes time. It's taken me 8 years to figure this out. So, it takes time. And for some of us, we have to figure it out, and we have to do detoxifications, and, it takes time. And I don't want anybody to think that, oh, this is just going to happen overnight and I can stop taking my ADHD meds, or I can stop taking my meds, whatever has been prescribed from you. You want to work with a doctor, and especially an addiction counselor, because they're the ones that are most educated in dopamine addiction and what you can do, and they can really help you create systems to regulate yourself. Real quick disclaimer, you mind reading it off to them?
So, Lauren Rose and Stephen Ellis are not licensed mental or physical health professionals and are not licensed to treat or diagnose any health conditions. All information and advice we share is based off our own research and understanding of studies conducted using the standard scientific process, along with our personal lived experiences and observations. Although we will use psychological, medical, and other scientific studies as a reference, the information we provide is not to be used to replace a licensed physician's advice, but rather to be used in conjunction with your healthcare provider's instructions. We highly recommend you confer with and seek medical or mental health care if needed, and never ignore your body's responses to any new activities.
Yes. If I were to ask you what's dopamine, what would you tell them? What's your best description of it?
So oddly enough, as I've mentioned previously, one of the activities I engage in on a daily basis is posting on my social media these daily affirmations or daily motivational posts, whether it's through text or video. And it just so happened to coincide today because some people in my life are dealing with extreme anxiety. I wanted to focus on one of the beneficial aspects of life. And dopamine, in my mind, is, to quote Tony Tone, it feels good. It brings you that satisfaction, that motivation to push forward each day. Dopamine, as Lauren has mentioned, is not just something to be looked at in a negative fashion, because let's face it, just about everything in life has a positive and a negative relation. It's all about how you live your life. It's all about how you use what is involved in your life. And dopamine is essential to be able to get up every day and push forward. Lauren's mentioned her ADHD. I could have it. I don't know. I've not been diagnosed, but I have been diagnosed officially since 2014 with major depression, anxiety, and PTSD. So I could very well just delve into that dark side of things. But I see dopamine as one of those chemicals that helps motivate me and pushes me forward. Obviously, that's not the only thing, but whatever activities I engage in, that's going to help affect the dopamine levels in my body to be able to live each day in a positive manner.
Absolutely. Yeah. So it's a neurotransmitter, which is a chemical messenger in our brain that travels through our nervous system, and it plays a physical and cognitive role in our body. So like as Steve said, it affects our whether we are motivated to do things, and that's physical and mentally. So if we don't have enough dopamine in our system, like for me as an ADHD person, I'm diagnosed with the low end, which is sometimes true. Sometimes I wake up and I absolutely do not want to do anything, and I do need an extra push. And so some days I'm able to like cognitively enforce myself to do things. Like I'll start, well, if I get up and I do this thing, then I'll be able to relax for the rest of the day, and I can talk myself through it. But if my dopamine is super, super low, there's no talking myself into doing things. And that has negatively impacted my life for sure, especially when it comes to work. Those people that call off a lot usually have low dopamine. So when I was younger, I used to take things like whether I never took ADHD medication. I never liked the way it made me feel, so I've always refused it. But I used to self-medicate, which doesn't mean it's any better. So I have found different ways of getting that dopamine. In the morning, I always have to use the bathroom, so the first thing I do is give myself a splash of cold water. Always have something, a beverage there to drink. Those little things like wake up different chemicals that help me get enough dopamine to then do the things I have to do. Sometimes I've noticed I do have to scroll a little bit. I was telling Steve earlier, I don't like it. I'm not proud of it, but sometimes I do need like a literally 10-20 minutes of just scrolling on my phone through reels just to get myself moving, because it's giving me the mental stimulation, the dopamine in my system, so that I will actually get up and move. It's wild. It's so weird to think about that. It's just a chemical in my body that is not allowing me to move, and how real it really is for some of us. So it is the motivation, reward, pleasure. It affects your mood, attention, learning, all those things. I know some people that they absolutely have to listen to music to be able to focus. And I'm the same way. If I'm trying to learn something new that I absolutely have no interest in, I have to listen to music. Now, what I have learned is I cannot listen to crazy music. I used to do that. But now that I've gone through all these dopamine withdrawals, and to get myself off of drugs and everything, now it's literally just meditation music, concentration music for me. But there was a time in my life where I had to listen to like hardcore heavy metal music. And I know a lot of people, especially like goes to the gym and stuff like that, that's what gets them pumped enough to do the workout. And so that's okay. If you need little small bursts of extra adrenaline, like pumping, dopamine pumping, something to get you motivated to do it, it's okay, and that's a good thing. It's when it becomes that you need that all the time. That's when you have become a dopamine addict. And that is what's going to cause you to start seeking more and more and more and more intense things to get you motivated. And that's when you need to go on a dopamine withdrawal and kind of just get yourself back down to normal status. So like I said, for me, since I do not take ADHD meds, I'm constantly on this like weird roller coaster throughout my life and throughout my monthly cycle as a female, where I already know right after my monthly cycle, I have lots of energy and lots of motivation to do things for about 2 weeks. And in the last 2 weeks of the month, I need extra help. And I think a lot of women go through this. I think women with ADHD is just a little bit more extreme. And so we have to be very, very like cognitive and understanding, even certain foods, when I'm in that I can't do anything, I have to eat foods that are a little bit more stimulating. So I'll eat more red meats and, flavor up my foods a little bit more. I try not to eat cakes and stuff like that because it's not good for you, and sugary things. But I do up like seasonings and I up my red meat intake. Whereas in the beginning of the month, when I already know that I have good levels of dopamine, I will eat more bland foods and do more of a vegan type, not vegan because I'm not vegan, but more of a vegetarian Mediterranean diet type thing, where it's a little bit more bland, so that I can help balance my body out. Because if you have too much dopamine, like I said, you end up thrill seeking too much, and it becomes to the point where it starts really affecting your life, and you'll keep searching for new things and new things and new things. And it can really create a downward spiral for you. As much as dopamine is important, like we said, there's always opposite ends of the spectrum. So real quick, I want to talk about scientifically what happens when we don't receive enough dopamine. It creates movement disorders, Parkinson's disease, ADHD, tremors, stiffness, difficulty with balance and coordination. I'm ADHD, which means autism ADHD. So I notice this a lot when I'm having my low dopamine sides. I have my balance is really off. I do a lot of yoga and stuff like that, and trying to do some of the poses. And it's funny because until we started researching about this video, I didn't realize that was what was happening. Because my dopamine was so low that I had no balance. Even walking, I can't even walk in a straight line when my dopamine is too low. It's insane how much it affects your body and the way you move. It can contribute to depression and low motivation. You just don't want to do anything. And it's simple things, even like brushing your teeth, eating, drinking water, things that you're supposed to do. If your dopamine is too low, you won't do anything. And it's not in your head. It's not a mental process. It's a physical and mental process. So, a lot of people beat themselves up when they call themselves lazy and everything. You're not lazy. You're just dopamine deficient, and you need the extra kick. So maybe that's a moment if you want to put on some crazy music to get you pumped up, or, scroll through reels just for a little bit, but set timers. I think that's a big thing. Because you can get kind of, especially if you have ADHD, you can kind of get lost scrolling. But so set maybe like a 10-minute timer. It's like, okay, now it's time to move. It affects your cognitive, like I've been talking about. So you can't concentrate. You'll even have issues with memory. Like you can't retain anything that you're learning, which is why I listen to music when I'm learning something new. I just don't let it be like some crazy hardcore music anymore. Now it's more, what is it called? I can't even think of what it's called, but music without lyrics, because I don't want it conflicts with the information, and I can't concentrate either. So now I listen to classical music is what it's called. Restless leg syndrome. That's interesting because everybody with ADHD and anxiety has that your legs just, tapping like a nut. That's actually from low dopamine. Too low dopamine. Your body is like trying to get your body moving, and so it'll force you into a restless leg syndrome. For you, have you ever had a moment where you had like too low dopamine and you could like feel it and you just don't want to do anything?
Yeah, it's a daily struggle for me. I get up in the morning and I have to motivate myself. That's one of the consequences of having the mental health issues I do. But one of the things that really helps me is just finding something mentally that helps keep me motivated. I've got to go to work this amazing job where I can help support and uplift people. It really helps energize me and get me out of bed to do that. Or I'm in the process of looking for a new residence and knowing that other people are depending on me to do my due diligence and put forth the effort. People are a huge motivating factor for me. So even though I've got these mental health disorders, it's just that small amount of time in the morning that I'm faced with. Do I just want to lay here and sort of dwell on what could go wrong, or do I want to be more realistic and think about the positive aspects of life that can occur if you just take that brief moment to step out of bed and push through your day?
I love that you brought that up, because that's actually a really big thing for mental health in general and depression, is finding a motivation outside of yourself. What they have found through studies and stuff is most people, it's almost like a self-love thing. It's like we don't care about ourselves enough to be internally motivated. It's a natural thing. But if we have someone else relying on us, whether it be a job or a child or spouse or friend, we are 10 times more likely to actually accomplish our goals. And which is why they say to join groups and join, anything that has more than one person involved. It's if you have a mental health issue, trying to be a solo lone the best for you, because you don't have that internal motivation to keep you going. You'll get like a jolt at the beginning, and thing, especially if they don't have clients and stuff relying on them anymore. um it's interesting. People really need to, they really need something outside of themselves relying on them. That's why they even will say get a dog, get a cat, get a plant, something. You have to have something outside of yourself to keep you going. And we are tribal creatures, it just makes sense that trying to be a solo person and doing everything on your own is not going to be enough motivation to get you to achieve your goals. So you definitely want to create goals that are going to fulfill you, but you also have to have something that's going to help the tribe and help, society in general. So the absolutely biggest thing anybody can do, whether you have a mental health disorder, ADHD, dopamine, whatever addiction, is you have to find a group. And, whether that be a work team, an actual sports team, like there's adult teams that you can join. It could be even game boards. They have D&D, video game like things, whatever you are really into. I get that you're not the only human in the world that's into it, and there's other people. And just meeting with a group of people, and having a goal there can help be enough to motivate you to keep going. So I love that you brought that up.
You froze for about 30 seconds there. Right before you mentioned the tribe, you froze for about 30 seconds.
I keep freezing. I don't know what else I can do.
Oh, you're doing fine.
I'll have to rewatch this over and do a lot of editing, it sounds like.
That's okay.
We probably have to pay that. Huh?
We're doing the best we can. Do you
want
to backtrack a little bit, or do you want to push forward?
We'll just have to keep pushing forward. I don't know. I have to look back into it and maybe have to cut some parts out. I don't know. I'll have to look at it. There's no way of me knowing unless I watch it again.
Okay, let's resume then in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
All right. So on top of, understanding that we need something outside of ourselves to keep us motivated and give us purpose to keep going and to drive our dopamine levels up to a normal range, there's also the downside of getting dopamine overload. And the biggest thing that when people hear dopamine overload, they think about social media. They think about, you know, these fast-paced movies, you know, or TV shows and stuff like that. And that is somewhat part of it, but it's nowhere near the substances that we take. Food, having food that is too seasoned and stuff like that, it has more of an impact on our dopamine levels than any social media you'll watch all day. So, you know, cutting back on your seasonings and stuff like that. First of all, it's good for your health to cut back on the salt and stuff like that. But and also the types of food that you're eating. Like I mentioned before, red meat, it's naturally just more satiating to the palate. So it's gonna give you more of a dopamine kick than vegetables and, you know, your boring foods. Cake, stuff like, you know, processed foods have chemicals in them. Anything with MSG, all those things have chemicals in them that, you know, get you addicted to them. Cheese, even. So you know, you want to take moments where you are addressing your diet and making sure that you're not constantly overwhelming your senses with high dopamine foods. And like I said, it's very simple to do that. Just every other day, maybe, you know, choose to do a more of a vegetarian diet. You know, eggs are really, really good for you. You can eat eggs every day, every meal. But if you are eating like red meat every, you know, 3 times a day, every day, that's not good for you at all. You know, you have to make sure that you have vegetables, green leafy vegetables, eggs, nuts. All those things are natural dopamine feeders, and they'll help you so that you don't get the dopamine overload. So when you have overload, marijuana is a big one. I don't think people understand how dangerous. Like, it's interesting because I was hardcore my entire since I was like 16 years old, hardcore marijuana smoker. And the more research I do on my mental health disorders, and which are anxiety, autism, ADHD, and let's say anxiety disorder, I have all those things, and I realized that marijuana is actually playing a huge role in exacerbating my symptoms. And I never knew. I thought I was helping myself by smoking, you know, because it was making to me it was making life more bearable. But what I didn't realize is that it was overloading my system. And so it made it so that mundane tasks that I need to do, like taking care of my kids, feeding myself, you know, just self-care things, were so mundane that I just was not doing them because I was just looking to get high. And we think that marijuana is so harmless, but it's proven. It's all over neuroscience, it's all over psychology websites and everything like that, that marijuana actually causes us more issues than not. And if you have a mental health disorder, and it's not helping your anxiety, it's actually exacerbating it, because marijuana is just an escape. It helps you escape from the symptoms, which doesn't ever let you face them and overcome them and create a tolerance for them so that you can continue to get better. It's wild. My book that I'm writing, Inside Out, is about anxiety disorders, because that's, you know, the research that I've been doing the last 8 years, because that's my biggest thing. And that is, I don't talk about marijuana much in there because I want people to buy the book, and everybody, ever since it's been legalized, everybody's just like, well, it's good for me and I'm going to take it. But it's through researching for that book is when I realized how much marijuana is playing such a role in our country. And it scares me that it's been legalized in such a way. Like, it's like, I know the government knows these things, so why did they, you know, just, it's kind of like one of those things where they're trying to appease the population, like get them all to shut up and leave them alone, you know, and they just want the tax money. And people you know, they don't think about these things. They just want to feed their dopamine. It's an addiction. And that's why there are literally AA meetings for marijuana addiction. And everybody's like, you can't get addicted to marijuana. Neuroscience says you can. It's an overstimulant for your neuroreceptors. So when you do too much when you take too much alcohol, when you do too much marijuana, when you take drugs, meth, what other, cocaine, all those things, they all contribute to a dopamine overload, which can cause psychosis, which I have had psychosis episodes where that's where you're hearing things and you're seeing things, and it's like a schizophrenic episode. And mania. So manic episodes, that's when you're like, it's almost like you can't sleep, having racing thoughts, impulsive behavior. All those things are part of what happens when you get so out of your normal dopamine, range. You start getting into addiction levels. That's, all you need to do is do something once for you to become addicted to it. And I think people think that that's impossible, but it's proven facts that all you need to do is take a substance once, and your mind, your brain. We just watched an episode, video that was extremely informative, which I'll link below actually, because I think everybody should watch that video. That was really, really good, and it was only like 20 minutes long, where all you need to do is drink alcohol one time, more than one drink. I think the guy said after 3 drinks is when we get overloaded, and that's when addiction can start with alcohol. Cocaine, meth, marijuana. All you need to do is take one hit, and your brain is going to be wired to seek for more, for indefinitely, until you go on a detox and you get your levels back down. And some people aren't as lucky as I am, who have been able to do it naturally. Some people need substances to get themselves back into normal range. And also the last thing I want to talk about with dopamine, excess dopamine, it causes agitation, and it is a catalyst for anxiety disorders. So, for me, I've had to stop drinking caffeine because I noticed that it gets me really agitated. Caffeine is something that we get addicted to. Most of the United States is addicted to caffeine. So it makes sense that it's in this range. It's this whole concept of, studying dopamine has been so like mind opening, because I'm like, oh my gosh, especially if you have an addictive personality and you can't stop. It's part of my autism that once I start something, it's not even hyperfocus, it's hyperfixation. I cannot stop doing it. So I have to set like timers, and I have to like have a time in between where I like come out of that mode, and detox myself from that mode and be able to switch to a new topic or a new stuff, a new thing, a new task. I can't just, you can't just give me a task and expect me to move to another one quickly. Like I have to like pull myself out and then refocus onto another one. So that's why block scheduling for me is so important. It's, and I have to have like a good 10-15 minutes in between where I do some breath work, and I have to completely come out of whatever mode I was in, because I get so focused, and like it's lazy. It's like, it's more than hyper focus. I'll tell you, it's like it's crazy, because people work their whole lives to get into, it's called flow state. And I'm like, I'm always in flow state. I'm always hyper focused on whatever I'm doing. I don't know how to not be. And there's other people who just, they're, doing all this extra work to try to get there. And I think it's so funny that autistic people are just naturally there. We're just always like, there's nothing else happening. I'm here, So what about you? Have you felt yourself like having a dopamine overload?
So, as I mentioned, one of the things that motivates me is supporting and uplifting others. And that should be a good thing, right? But at the end of the day, I truly believe that in order to love, care, and help other people, you have to be willing to do those things for yourself too. Whether it's because of things that my inner child needs to have resolved, due to trauma, my mental health, what have you. Could be several reasons for it. I like to ensure that the people in my life are happy, even though at the end of the day, happiness is something we all have to figure out for ourselves. So it's a balance with me. I'm not anxious in the way that if I don't do something like I had been previously, it's going to cause me to be alienated or exiled from a group, because I've reached that point in life where I don't give a flying fig Newton. If you're true, if you're genuine, then no is a complete answer, and that'll be respected. I'll give an explanation to people that I love and care about, but if you're someone who wants to use me, then again, no is a complete answer. At the end of the day, though, I've really had to work on myself and understand that even though helping others affects my dopamine levels, that's still going to have negative consequences. You can still crash because it's not just about the dopamine at that point. You're going to end up trying to fill a cup from an empty pitcher. So you need to take that time for yourself, refresh, relax, rejuvenate. And going back to what Lauren was saying, you may have those days where you feel unmotivated or lazy. It may not be just a lack of dopamine. It could be too much dopamine, and you have just caused yourself to crash through whatever activity you've engaged in. So you need to be willing to allow yourself the same understanding and grace you give others, and have those days where not necessarily that you do nothing, but where you're not engaging in the same activities, putting forth the same levels of energy that you normally would, because we all deserve a break. We're also willing to give other people grace, understanding in those breaks. But at the end of the day, I've noticed more often than not, we're our own worst critics, and we're not willing to do the same thing for ourselves, which also causes your dopamine levels to come down, because dopamine's not just affected by the physical, it's affected by your emotional state, your mental state, and you need to find ways to balance that in your life. Lauren was talking about people who engage in marijuana use. Even that, some people do need to utilize it in their life, whether it's for a medical purpose that's prescribed by a doctor, or it's something that they're utilizing in place of medication because medication's not available, because unfortunately, with big pharma being what it is, there's certain anxiety or mental health medications that are often shorted. So in the state it's legal, they'll substitute marijuana. Now, everyone's got their own opinion about that, but even then, do not use it as a replacement for what you actually need. There are alternate routes to achieving that dopamine boost. Engage in an activity that brings you joy and satisfaction. Spend time with people who care about you, because that emotional connection, that's going to increase your dopamine levels as well. Just find ways to bring about that sense of pleasure, that sense of joy and satisfaction, without ending up overdoing it and crashing. Because I've been there, I still get there every once in a while, but none of us are perfect. We're all on our own journeys, and we all have to make the same mistakes to a certain extent in order to truly learn how to achieve that balance for your life.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a great caveat to go into. If you feel like you're getting out of balance in your dopamine levels, whether it be excess or you know, deprivation, what are the common approaches to overcoming that? And or what they call dopamine detoxing, especially in our fast-paced environment where everything is constantly stimulating us, from our cell phones to the lights to everything, to the music. So it's really easy and simple, and it's funny that people will fight it so much, but literally limiting your cell phone usage. So I had mentioned before, block scheduling, especially if you have an issue, if you notice that you're scrolling and you go into doom scrolling and you can't stop, or you just have that addictive personality like I do. Anybody who's ever been diagnosed with ADHD or anxiety most likely has some kind of an addictive personality to something. So what I have found is I have to limit myself. So I set timers. I'll set timer on my phone, that as soon as it goes off. You can even on your actual apps, depending on your phone, you can set timers that only allow you to get so many hours throughout your day. And just every month evaluate your timing. Like, am I spending, how much time am I spending on my devices, whether it be watching Netflix, playing video games, whatever it is. That should absolutely be one of the things that you're evaluating. Pick a month and sit there and do a habit tracker on how long you're on your phone, how long you're playing video games, how long you're doing this, and is it impacting your life? Like, you don't want to do this if it's not impacting your life. If you got a good job and you're paying your bills and you're spending time with your kids and you're doing all the things, this is not something you need to do. This is for people who legitimately are having issues and they're not reaching their goals, and they're, maybe not spending as much. If your spouse is telling you, hey, is constantly complaining about the amount of video game usage or the amount of time that you're watching TV and not spending time with your kids or your family, you are someone who needs to be doing a habit tracker, and you're a person that needs to be evaluating your values and setting it's called digital boundaries, literally. And like I said, for me, I am one of those people, because like I said, I get into that hyperfixation mode where it's hard for me to stop what I'm doing. If I'm doing one thing, I will continue to do it until I go into a crash, like you had mentioned. And then I'll finally, okay, now it's time to move on because I'm completely over this thing. And that's not healthy. That's not balanced. So I literally block schedule out my days, and I'm like, okay, so if I get, and I use it as a reward, as I was telling you, I think before we started recording this, is I use like social media, relaxation and just sitting around and stuff like that. Those are my rewards. So I'll make a to-do list, and I'll be like, okay, so it's going to take me about 2 hours to get all my chores done today. And after an hour, I'll give myself 10 to 15 minutes of reward time, which will be doom scrolling, watching, a little video on YouTube, something that'll keep my dopamine up. Because if I don't, I will crash, or I will start like resenting the task that I'm doing. So I give myself little rewards. Crossing something off on your to-do list is also a dopamine hit, and that'll help you keep going. It's like a, yes, I did it, and it'll literally give you motivation to keep going. And that's a proven technique for people. That's why to-do lists are so pushed within the grown-up adulting world, is because there's a reason for it. Crossing stuff out, or crossing out a whole thing, helps you keep going. Like as you had mentioned, prioritizing social connections. So making sure to schedule out time for your friends or for your family members, and for you to do something that you love, and with a community, community service, whatever it is. Humans are not lone species. We are tribal species. We have to have a community. We have to have a tribe, whatever that may be. Whatever that looks like for you. It could be, going to a gym. A lot of guys do the MMA or the actual gym, and they have their people that they see there all the time. And for women, sometimes it's yoga. Art is a good one for both. It doesn't matter who you are. If maybe you're not into any of those things, and you just want a group of people that you play video games with, schedule that time in, but just don't make it be your everyday. I think that's the biggest problem, is that guys, it's, in my experience, dating men who were really into gaming, soon as they got home, that is what they did until they went to bed. And they would stay up all night, and that's all they did. And it was hard to interact with them. They didn't want to interact with me. They just wanted to play their video games. They didn't want to interact with their children because they were so caught up in their online world. So you have to give yourself time. Like my current partner, he's great about it, because he likes to play video games. It's like it is an escape for him. It's a reward for him, but he doesn't allow it to take over his entire day. He makes sure to spend time with the kids. He makes sure to help clean up the house. He's very good about, allocating specific time slots for things. And that's what I appreciate about him so much. Simple things as practicing mindfulness. So making sure that you literally give yourself time in the day to meditate. You don't have to meditate for an hour, but 10 minutes a day to just completely detach from everything. Just put on some meditation music, and completely nothing stimulating at all is so important for you. You'll notice so much clarity. You'll notice that you feel better. And then do some breath work. I think 20 minutes a day is like a perfect amount of time to spend on your mindfulness. So it's 10 minutes of meditation, 10 minutes of breath work. And you'll notice such a difference in your mood and the way you just walk through the world. But if I do breath work first thing in the morning for like 2 to 4 hours, I feel like I'm floating on air. Like, you know what I mean? Like nothing bothers me. I'm not as agitated. I literally feel lighter. I don't feel as tense. Like it's amazing. I highly recommend mindfulness activities. And you know, coming into the present moment, not worrying about the past or the future, and just being here now, not a care in the world. So important. And as you had mentioned earlier, engaging in diverse activities. So try to switch it up. Don't play the video games every single day. Maybe switch it up, maybe every other day. And on the days that you don't play the video games, maybe read a book, educate yourself, listen to a podcast, work out. Movement is so important. It helps a natural form of happy chemicals that come into your body. So, you know, maybe working out is not your favorite thing in the world, but just getting some movement in every other day is going to help your overall mental health, dopamine levels, and everything balance out naturally. Movement is, I can't stress it, how important it is, and how much our society just is so stagnant. We're constantly sitting at desks or sitting somewhere. Even if you work in a factory setting, you're standing in one spot, just, you know what I mean? Like our you know, back in the day, we were constantly on the move. We were traveling. You know, when we were living our tribal days, we were traveling from place to place, following the water. We were hunting. We were gathering food. So we were always on the move, whereas now we don't do anything. And then we wonder why our health and our mental health and everything else is so messed up. It's because we're a completely stagnant species. And then, like I said, even like doing little, I know people are going to think I'm such a nerd for this, but doing little cognitive exercises like puzzles and like mind stimulating activities, it really helps. And it'll help you keep your mind for longer. It helps decrease the likelihood of Alzheimer's, and you know, and increases your capacity to remember things and to focus. So literally, I mean, I know this all sounds like old people stuff and nobody wants to do all these things, but it's so freaking important to, you have to be an adult. Like there's a certain time in your life where you have to say, okay, whatever I'm doing is not working. It's affecting my relationships. It's affecting my goals. I'm not getting anywhere in life, and I need to wake up and I need to start doing something different. And these are all little simple things that you can be doing that cost absolutely nothing. That's my favorite part about most of, you know, taking care of yourself is free. It's literally free. Going for a walk is free. Getting some exercise is free nowadays because of the joys of YouTube. You know, you don't have to get a gym membership if you don't want to, but I do kind of recommend at least going out somewhere, you know, once a week to be around other people. Do you have any other suggestions to help people like detox and get off their devices and get off their escapism things?
Well, it's, as you just mentioned, going outside of your comfort zone. I think one of the biggest inhibitors to dopamine is just getting caught up in your routine. It's okay to have routine. Consistency can be wonderful, but if you're noticing that you feel unmotivated, that your routine is trapping you, then just take that little bit of courage that it does take to get out of your normal routine. Recognize that you and anyone else, you're responsible for your own happiness. So, as Lauren said, there are people out there who just get stuck and find that they're addicted to video games, they're addicted to drugs. And yes, addiction is a real problem that has to be overcome, but you take responsibility for your actions, even if there is an addiction, and you either seek additional help to get out of that state of mind, or you find some way to pull yourself out. One of the things I've noticed with people, and we discussed this in our first full episode dealing with entitlement and self-victimization, is people don't necessarily want to take responsibility. They're afraid that they'll be seen as the villain Well, you're not a villain until you start blaming other people for your actions. Lauren has mentioned that her partner finds a great balance with his gaming, and I think that's wonderful. On the opposite end of things, there are people out there who have partners or people in their lives. They do work a rather intensive job. They're getting up early in the morning, they're coming home late due to traffic or just, again, the intensity of their job, and they need to pull themselves out of that work mode. So they need to have an activity that pulls them out. Engaging in that activity and then spending time with you does not mean you are not a priority. It means that they need to have some way to focus and bring themselves, so to speak, back to a state where they can engage with you. Otherwise, they're not going to be able to do so, and you're not going to get their full attention. So many people blame others for their need for dopamine, but you cannot use people as a substitute for the work that you yourself should be doing. Having that as a focus should put the onus of responsibility on you. It should give you the willingness to try activities outside of your normal realm. Even something as discovering a new piece of knowledge that you were not aware of before, delving into research, reading a new book, engaging with people that you haven't engaged with before. Just simple things like that can raise your dopamine levels in a positive way. One of the things that we've definitely noticed has caused an issue within the world of dopamine is that people want to find some way to feel pleasure. And if it's not drugs, it could be pornography. And it's not realistic. 9 times out of 10, you're watching that. It's not going to be realistic. Not every partner you engage with is going to want to be choked or slapped or roll their eyes in the back of their head. Just in the research I found. You're all right. So you're going to find that there's a difference. It should be obvious, but it isn't to everyone, that reality and fantasy are 2 different realms. I'm a geek, so I live in a realm of fantasy when I'm reading my comics, when I'm playing video games. But at the end of the day, I fully am aware that I'm living in my world, but I can also mentally escape into that world. I don't want to fully escape from reality. And that's what a lot of people do with drugs or alcohol or pornography. No one is saying that sex is bad. It's just engaging in certain sexual activities and finding ways to artificially boost your dopamine levels. That's definitely a negative. And you're going to deal with more negative consequences than you are positive consequences, because you're going to need to enhance the level of activity, the level of extremism, as you become further and further addicted to whatever you're engaging in. It's an unfortunate side effect. I've seen people, there are people who go to porn addicts anonymous meetings out there. It's much more satisfying to actively engage with another human being, or human beings if you're into that, no judgment. Form those emotional bonds and engage in that activity, because that's going to be a more natural and more satisfying dopamine boost, because you've got that emotional connection that's already giving you a boost. So when you reach that level, if you do, then it just coincides and enhances that feeling. You want to be on average between 40 to 100 in the units by which they measure dopamine. Drugs, they found, can get you upwards of 1,000. And obviously you're going to crash or you're going to overdose. So that's not good for you. Pornography, depending upon the extremism of the content, that's going to get you over 100% as well. And it's not just because of the content you're watching and the mental effect, it's because of what you may end up doing to yourself physically. You may do physical harm to yourself with those activities. We've all heard about people engaging in autoerotic asphyxiation. And obviously, that's not an activity that is looked fondly upon, and it's not going to give you a pure dopamine boost either. So you just need to be aware of what makes for a positive dopamine boost and what makes for a negative dopamine boost. And we'll delve into what happens with adult activities and the pornography industry as well as sex work in a later episode, because this is an adult program and there's very little that's off limits. So if any of this content offends you, just be aware of that. This is an adult platform.
Absolutely. Yeah. I have it set that anyone under 18 can't watch it. So as long as they're not lying on their profile, it's definitely not on kids' YouTube. But I love that you brought up the pornography, because just real quick, I know we're going to go into it in a future episode, but I actually watched several presentations by neuroscientists talking about how pornography and the combination of the reward of, having an orgasm while you're watching it, what it's doing to your brain is making it so that you cannot have an orgasm unless you're watching it. So what happens is a lot of erectile dysfunction, and women even who can't orgasm when they're with an actual partner, it's because of their usage of pornography, because it's not the same. It's not the same. It creates a disconnect between humans, and it's becoming a big issue with relationships, because in real life, most people don't want to have sex 5 times a day like they show in the porno, and they sure as hell don't want to do it for hours a day, because we don't have time. We have other things we have to do. And in my experience, that's been my biggest issue. I've noticed with partners who watch a lot of porn and partners who don't, the ones that do, they are the ones that they feel like they need to perform, and they're actually hard on themselves if they can't perform for these long drawn out periods of time and stuff like that. And that can cause issues too. So there is actual whole studies on neuroscience linking pornography to erectile dysfunction, pornography to relationship issues, and pornography to addiction. It's a legit thing that you can go to addiction, get addicted to and need help, detoxing off of. There's literally whole psychiatric studies and not only studies, but departments that specialize in helping people to get off of a porn addiction. That's how bad it's getting. It's so accessible and so easy to get nowadays. And it's interesting to me that people still pay for pornography because it's free. I don't understand. It's weird to me that OnlyFans and those kind of sites have blown up and people are making so much money off of them because you can literally get the stuff for free. And it's wild to me, but it's a huge issue. We have over sexualized everything, and there's actually proof that pornography is a huge catalyst for that. Like I said, dopamine is the reward center of the brain, is your motivation and everything like that. So it's really, really centrically linked. And so if you're, and especially like I said, if you have an orgasm while you're watching it, that reward, mechanism in your brain is like, okay, so I need more, because it doesn't understand the difference between a reward of just checking off something off your to-do list and having an orgasm because you're watching some crazy erotic porn or you're taking drugs or drinking alcohol. It can't differentiate your activities. All your brain knows is that it likes what happened when you did this. So it's going to continue to seek out these activities because that's how your brain works and that's how your neurotransmitters work. It's constantly looking to continue to do the task that got it its reward. So that's why, like I said, hyperstimulation, you want to detox from it, and so that you can get down to a basic level so that, like as you mentioned, between 50 and 100, so that you can literally get pleasure from basic things. When you go on a dopamine detox, you start getting stimulated by just the wind blowing in the air, and the colors of nature and stuff like that. Like, it's crazy. Like I said, I am a recovering drug and alcohol addict. And when I detox, like, the world is a completely different place for me. Like, I see a flower and like it makes my day now. And things that I like took for granted before because I was so stuck on trying to get my next high, my next fix. Seeing my kids now excites me and gets me excited. Like, it's little things like that I hated. Like, it's not, well, I wouldn't say I hated it. It's just like, I just took it for granted. I never noticed it. I never noticed how beautiful it was because it did not stimulate me the way it should, you know? So real quick, before we end this episode, I wanted to talk about the 4 feel-good chemicals in our bodies, because everything that has to do with mental health, because that is the theme of our podcast, all it is just chemicals going through your body and sending messages to the brain. It's very little to do with what we actually think. It's all physiological mechanisms that happen within our body. It's wild that it comes out as a cognitive thing, but really it's all a physiological, system, and neurotransmitters and everything like that. So dopamine, serotonin, melatonin, and GABAs are the feel-good chemicals within our body, and the most simplest things can stimulate these things. For dopamine, completing a task, crossing it off, simple things like that will give you your reward, will stimulate your reward center and help you release dopamine into your body. Self-care activities, so doing things for yourself, doing what is it called, hobbies that you love. Those are little things like reward, like I said, how I do my mundane task and then I reward myself with something I want to do. So that would be drawing for me, reading a book, doing some research, watching a video. Those are my fun things that I reward myself for doing bigger tasks that I need to do. Eating good food, like I mentioned several times in this episode, processed food, sugary foods, foods with too much salt, that are too palatable, are all things that are going to take you outside of normal range and going to cause your body to want more, want more, want more. And that stimulates people into overeating and getting hooked on foods that are not good for them. So, cut something. I'm not saying completely deprive yourself of things that you love, but just, regulate and balance those things. Serotonin helps you with your moods. So, simple things like meditation, getting outside, sun exposure, at least 20 minutes a day is super important. Doesn't matter the weather. They say to try to get, some kind of outdoors activity for at least 20 minutes a day, especially in the morning, to help boost your serotonin. It'll set your mood for the rest of the day. And moving your body. Like, I cannot stress how important it is to get up, do some jumping jacks, get involved even in low impact exercises, depending on your nervous system and your anxiety levels. Doing too intense workouts will actually exacerbate your anxiety levels. So if you have an anxiety disorder, you want to stay away from HIIT or bodybuilding and stuff like that. It actually will exacerbate your symptoms and make you more agitated. So low impact yoga, Pilates, Tai Chi, slow but methodical movements are your best friend. Melatonin, which is what helps with your sleep and wake cycles. Taking warm baths will help you get into that sympathetic state so that you can, go to bed. For me at night, in order to help me to get into that, clear my mind and get into rest mode, I have to take a warm shower. I love taking a cold shower in the morning after my workouts because that helps me, it boosts me to, it gets my cortisol running and gets me moving for the day. But at nighttime, super hot shower is my best friend. Like I said, exercise in the morning or in the afternoon if you're having that like weird crash. Most people say, oh, take a nap. No, that's the worst thing you can do when you're having a crash and you have to keep going for the day. Literally, all you have to do is get up and walk. You walk for 10 minutes and you'll feel a burst of energy. Doing breath of fire, if you're into breath work and stuff like that, which is a quick movement of your breath, will stimulate you to get going again. and also eating more eggs, fish, and nuts are all natural ways to get melatonin into your body. GABAs. This is all of, and this is so interesting because I learned today that alcohol is what affects your GABAs, which is it helps you calm you. And it's funny because my mother was a horrible alcoholic and she did not eat vegetables. She was a strict carnivore. And she used to make fun of people who ate vegetables and stuff like that and all that stuff. And it's so interesting that it's all linked because a natural way to get GABAs is to eat green vegetables, spinach, kale, and stuff like that naturally helps to release GABAs into your body. Green tea, and practicing yoga. So like, and also, what is it called? Like strengthening movement exercises. So, yoga, physical therapy, what is it called? It's like I can't think of the actual term, but it like when you're doing exercise, staying in one position, it's hard, like staying in plank, staying in a V-sit. So it's called like isotropic or something like that exercises. Those are really, really good exercises to help get your GABAs up, which actually calm you down. And it's so interesting. I do Pilates before I go to bed, and everybody's like, oh, you shouldn't work out before you go to bed. You can't sleep. And I never realized that because I do Pilates is why I'm able to go to sleep at night. It helps to burn off my extra energy. And it's a lot of stagnant motions where I'm holding a pose, or even yoga where I'm holding a pose. And that is why, is because it's literally releasing GABAs into my body. So now I have an actual like scientific way of explaining why it helps me, because everybody thinks I'm crazy because I work out before I go to bed. And it's like high intensity workouts in the morning and low intensity workouts before you go to bed is like ideal. But can you think of any other things that I didn't mention?
No, I think you've covered it very well. And for those of you listening, again, everything we're telling you is our research, it's our experiences. We're not telling you that if you have an urge that you shouldn't seek pleasure, just don't engage in hardcore pornography. It's better to have that mental stimulation through a book that emphasizes romance than it is to actually see unrealistic activities bringing about those urges within you. No one's telling you that you can't engage in any kind of activity, which we'll delve into in another episode, but find other ways to bring about those dopamine boosts that are within a healthy range. Lauren's mentioned some of hers. One of the reasons I've been accused in the past of being toxically positive is because I try to find joy in the small things in life. When I get up and go to work, I absolutely love the job, the career path I'm involved in right now, because I can go in and interact with coworkers that I want to help feel uplifted and supported because they play such vital roles throughout this organization and the organizations that we support, and yet they don't really have the voice. So I have the motivation, and just seeing them take joy in knowing that I appreciate them, that gives me a boost to help me get throughout the day. Coming home and seeing Monty's, my pug's mushy little joyful face, that gives me a boost. Taking him on a walk, engaging in cooking my dinner and eating healthy foods throughout the day, because I normally eat yogurt, some granola. I've got my vitamin supplements, natural, because you have to be very careful. Some of those supplements are just littered with sugars and artificial things that you don't want to be overdosing within your body. And yeah, just simple pleasures like that. Lauren's mentioned yoga. I practice yoga throughout the day. I go for a walk around the headquarters that my department is based in, because normally it's a desk job and I don't want to be sitting and become stagnant in that position and develop restless leg syndrome or see my dopamine levels get to a dangerous line. I want to be able to keep moving and keep my mind focused And if I'm noticing a negative reaction, I want to process and figure out why. At the end of
Mhm.
the day, if you're feeling some kind of way, one of the most important things you can do for yourself is to just cogitate and think about why that could be happening, so you can develop a solution, learn from whatever's transpired, and push forward in a different and hopefully more positive way.
Yeah. And it's so interesting because I think a lot of people, like, if within having too low and too high of dopamine, will sit. It talks a lot about anxiety and depression, and I find it so interesting that that those are the triggers for those two things, because I see within people with anxiety disorders, it's like sometimes anxiety disorders are brought on by people who don't understand the need for balance. They cause it upon people who are, like, trying to live healthy, because they are attacking you for being healthy. It's wild. I get it a lot, especially now. I think it's because people know me for who I was, and now they see me as, like, I'm constantly preaching about being healthy and doing adulting the right way, and being organized, and they're just like, I don't know. It's very interesting that when I talk about those things, I get attacked a lot, and it has. I've noticed that it has brought up, like, I feel like I had gotten rid of my anxiety and I handled it pretty well. I felt like it was a really big issue for me when I was younger, but I had learned how to not let it bother me. But now that I'm older, and now that I'm pushing, like, healthy living lifestyle, and working out and stuff like that, I get attacked for it constantly by people I don't know and people I do know, and that has brought up a lot of my anxiety back up. And it's because it's like, sometimes I find myself questioning, like, am I doing the right thing? And it's like, of course I am. It's the cognitive dissonance within other people. When you tell somebody that what they're doing is wrong, they get defensive naturally. They don't even realize it. It's like a subconscious thing sometimes. They don't even notice that they're attacking you. In their mind, they're just joking, or they're just messing with you, but they're not. They're literally, like, lashing out on you because what you're saying doesn't match their perspective on life. And it's very interesting to see that. And then on the other side, anxiety can be brought up from people who don't have healthy lifestyle and healthy systems in place to help them organize their lives and live in a way that's not going to cause them excess stress. And I've been going through that a lot in my book, focusing a lot on, creating systems and block scheduling and habit trackers and stuff like that, because, to be honest, the human is capable of doing so much more than we give ourselves credit for. We are amazing creatures, and we are able to accomplish so much in such a short amount of time. And all we have to do is create systems that will allow us to do that. And it'll help with our anxiety levels. It'll help keep us balanced. It'll help keep us from swaying. If you keep yourself busy and you keep yourself doing things that are going to help you, you won't have to worry about too low or too high of this, and not feeling good, and not having the motivation to do stuff. Like, it's all connected, and it's really so simple. And people get so mad when you give them simple solutions, because they think it's like our ego wants it to be difficult. It wants it to be like all these different things that you have to do, and task and everything like that. But really, it's not. It's so simple as just giving yourself time to meditate, breathing, doing chores, and like, you tell people, like, hey, just clean your house and you'll feel better. And they're like, no. And literally it will. There's so many studies that show that, your environment affects everything that has to do with your internal environment. Everything's connected. And creating balance is not that hard. It's really simple. You just have to, step out of your old ways of thinking and your programming, especially if you come from a family that was completely dysfunctional like I did. It's just, don't beat yourself up for not understanding these concepts. Don't beat yourself up for having these addictions and stuff like that. A lot of it is programmed into us. We grew up in a family that's full of cigarette smokers and alcoholics and drug addicts. It's subconsciously, it's going to, you're going to be like, well, when my mom was feeling this way, this is what she did to cope. So that's what I'm going to do. It's not your fault. And if you need help, reach out and get the help you need. And, if not, I hope we were able to give you some natural ways to help you detox from dopamine and, signs to look for within yourself. And hopefully, did we talk about social media and staying away from social media so much? Because
we did to a certain extent.
Yeah, that's a huge one. Like, oh yeah, I did. I talked about apps and timers and stuff like that. So yeah, just be mindful of balance. Balance is possible. I promise it's possible, and it's super, super important for your overall well-being and whole being and mental health and all those things. So I hope that this podcast episode was informative. Is there anything else you want to say to them real quick?
No, just those of you watching and listening, if you have anything you would like us to cover during any future episodes, we are open to feedback. We are open to insight and input. This is not going anywhere. We're having a great time doing this, and we want you to be able to get something from it, even if some people see it as a small thing. I see it as a big thing. Just knowing that you are not alone in this world, and that there are people who feel the same way you do, that there is support out there, and that if you need that support, you have every right to want to reach out for it.
Yeah, I think it's really important, especially for people who struggle with these things like I have. I think it's important that we share those stories of the struggle so that people know that they aren't alone, like you said, and that it's everybody. It doesn't matter where you come from. We all struggle in some form of another, and you're not alone, and your problems are not as, significant to you. Everybody goes through different things, and we all have our own issues that we're working through. And I think everybody is trying to find balance. It's not like it's something that we're all like just naturally have within us. I think everybody has something within them that they need to balance out. And it's trial and error. And in different stages of your life, you're going to find different times where you need to balance yourself out. You have kids, throws in a whole nother ball game of things that you need to balance out. And get a new job. Maybe your job's a little bit more demanding. You need to find more balance there. Getting into a relationship. There's so many different times within your life where you're going to have to readjust. And I think it's important that people understand that you do it once, and it's not like you're set for life. Your life is all about ups and downs and curves and readjustments and tracking your habits and doing what you have to do to make life work for you and not against you, and you have it in you, and it's possible. All of these things are possible, and you can literally do whatever whatever dreams you have, you can make them come true.